In this video, I want to show you my process on how I RX vocals, but before we get started, my name is Ed, you're watching Stokes Sounds, and if you like this video, please make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment, and if you want to support the channel, head over to our website, stokessounds.com. Now let's dive in. I've got a track here. As it's December, it's a Christmas song, it's a cover, and it's by an artist called Olivia Nicole. And let's just have a listen to the actual track itself so we get the context of what we're working with. And then I'm going to break down kind of my process of how I clean up vocals before I add any plugins or add any kind of actual processing. So let's just take a listen to the song.
Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special.
So you can hear it's, ballad, it's piano, vocal, it's kind of very magical, lots of reverb and all of that great stuff. But let's actually just solo the vocal. So the one that's been kind of RX'd already, and then we're going to play the one without it being RX so you can actually hear what the RX is doing.
Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special.
Now let's listen to the vocal, with the same processing on, but with no RX being done at all. It's going to be very subtle, but you're going to hear some certain kind of pops and clicks going on.
Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special.
So it sounds great, but you can definitely hear that there's some pops and clicks. And I also do a lot of dsing in iZotope RX. So you'll also hear that the S's kind of really stood out there. Even though that I do have a little bit of processing on, there is some dsing going on. What I like to do is I like to do everything in RX before I do anything. So it just means that I can process less in the box and kind of, make the plugins work not as hard. And that way it just gives me a little bit more flexibility. So for this demonstration purposes, I have left the processing on just for for levels and for you guys to actually hear the stuff in context. But first up, I am hearing some issues round here. If we just make this a bit bigger and we look at the actual waveform itself, you will notice that I have printed autotune on before I'm doing any RX. Now, the reason why I do that is because autotune is notoriously known for having lots of pops and clicks as soon as you put it on. So I like to print the autotune so the vocal is tuned, then I RX it, and then I mix it. And that's kind of just my process. Everyone does it differently, but that's just how I did it on this, in this instance. But if we just have a look at the actual waveform itself and find the areas that were causing issues when I was listening to that.
Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but
on My Heart. So there was one on Last Christmas and one on My Heart. You can hear on the My Heart. You can hear there's a little click there. So there are things happening around. So what I like to do is I like to highlight it, go to Audio Suite, go to Noise Reduction. I'm on RX10, and then we go to RX10 Connect. So you can see here, I've now got the audio file pulled up into RX, and it's in its own window because it's in its own software. And this is a little bit like Photoshop, but for audio. And this is kind of where I do all of the cleaning. So what I tend to do is I tend to go through the sharp S's where I really want to kind of push them down and control them. As I mentioned, the pops and the clicks and things that are causing problems. So let's just actually have a listen in RX to the dry vocal, and let's just have a listen through, and then we're going to go through and try and fix the problems as we hear it.
Ooh, oh, Last Christmas I gave you my heart.
So straight away on Last Christmas, the S's are very kind of too sharp to me. So what I like to do is I like to use the de-esser in RX, and I highlight where the S's are, and I can see, you can kind of see visually with like the kind of, you know, the more orange it is in certain areas, are kind of more problems. And, you know, I've used this plugin a lot, so you kind of get used to kind of visually seeing kind of waveforms and problems without actually hearing it. And I can see here that there is a sharp S. What I do is I just hit render, and I just do it very lightly, and I'm just taking it down 12 dB. So that's just, you know, ducking down those S's.
Last Christmas.
And Christmas.
Last Christmas I gave you my heart, but the heart.
I can see that there's a click at the end of the heart. So if we go declick, I can select it, render it.
But the very next day,
seems to be a little bit of a click as well.
Next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me
On that's
to save me from tears.
and the T's as well, kind of really sharp T's, because, you know, I'm going to put a compressor onto this vocal, and if there's the S and the T's and they're really strong and it's like pushing it, when I put the compressor on, it's going to really kind of slam the gain reduction on it, and I just want to have like a nice leveled controlled vocal before I'm applying any processing. And this is why kind of this method and this process before adding plugins is so important to my workflow.
Me from tears.
There's another one here.
Tears, I'll give it to someone. Give it to someone special. Someone special.
That one's a little bit. Let's try and do this.
Special. Last Christmas.
Now you can hear there was a click and there was a really sharp S at the same time. So I attack it with the de-esser again. And I can still hear the click, and I can see that the click is here. You can see in the orange, just that little line, there's a click. So we're going to go to the declick, render.
Last Christmas.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, if you listen, if I go 2 step backs before,
Last Christmas.
and then I go forward to what I just did.
Last Christmas.
It's like day and night. It's amazing. You know, you really clean a vocal up by doing this.
Last Christmas.
Another sharp one.
I gave you my heart. I gave you my heart.
On the mut, you can see again here, you can see this kind of sharp line. That was like a spike from something. Could be the cable, it could be a click, it could be anything from the signal. There's just this really sharp click. So let's just get rid of it.
I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me, from tears, I'll give it to someone.
You can see when the orange gets really kind of orangey, you kind of notice there's more of a problem, like this is fine, but you can see there's going to be a problem that's going to come up there.
Someone
special. And you can see it can be quite tedious, you know, you're going through the whole song and it takes hours. I'm only just doing the verse here for this demonstrational purpose, but, you know, this is the level of detail that I go in before I apply, you know, any processing.
One special, one speed and twice shy. I keep my distance, but you still catch my eye. Tell me.
Again, I'm doing it at 12 dB minus 12. You can change that to -8 or -4 or whatever number that you feel comfortable with, but I've just found that -12 dB on T's and S's seem to do the job.
Tell me, baby, do you recognize?
It also depends on the vocalist.
Do you recognize me? It's me. Well, it's been a year. It's been a year. It doesn't surprise.
Just on the S.
Doesn't surprise me. Surprise me. Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas. I wrapped it up. And sent it up and sent it with a note saying I love you, I meant it. Now I know what a fool I've been, but if you kiss me now, I know you fool me again.
So as you can see, that's kind of the section there that I've just kind of gone through. I've taken down the S's and I'm going to listen to it again. I'm going to see if I can hear anything. I noticed there were some plosives, so we're going to look at that as well. So if we just go from the start of this and let's have a look.
Last Christmas I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away.
On the UK, there's a little click.
You gave.
It's on the gave, but let's just declick it.
You gave it away.
Sounds nicer to me. Sounds smoother.
You gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone.
On the, yeah. Again, let's just declip.
I'll give it this. I'll give it to someone special. To someone.
On the sum 1, there's also a click.
Someone.
You can see the line. You can use this function here and you can kind of bring the line kind of more obvious by reducing the waveform. And you can see there.
Someone special.
Yep, that's eliminated it straight away.
Give it to someone special. Once beaten and twice shy. I keep my distance, but you still catch my eye. Tell me, baby.
On the tell me baby bit, there's a bit too much of a plosive, so I'm going to go to my deplosive function, which is here, and I'm just going to highlight it. You can hear that if we just render it down.
Tell me, baby.
Much better.
Tell me, baby.
If you listen to Tell Me Baby without it,
tell me, baby.
Then with deplosive on,
tell me, baby.
It's just cleaned it up completely for me.
Do you recognize me? Well, it's been a year, it doesn't surprise me. Happy Christmas, I wrapped it up and sent it with a note saying, I love you, I meant it. Now I know what a fool I've been, but if you...
Another one there, but if you...
What a fool I've been, but if you kiss me now, I know...
Did it on the wrong one.
I've been,
but if you... This one here, you can see.
But if you... I've been, but if you kiss me now, I know you fool me again.
That's it, and that's kind of how I would clean the vocal, and then I would send it back to Pro Tools, and then I would render that. So now I've got the RX'd version of the lead vocal. And the importance of that is, so now when I then apply compression and I apply EQ, you know, the reverb, you know, things are clean at source. You know, sometimes I've seen people put plugins on plugins, or they, you know, go really hard on a de-esser, and it can make the singer sound like they've got a lisp, and, you know, they're using plugins to kind of really hammer down on things. And I've really felt like over the past kind of, you know, 30 mixes, the more that I do kind of in the process of RX, and the more that I get things done correctly before I apply any plugins, the end result is always much better, because the plugins are working less, you know, there's less automation, you're not going to have lots of different things jumping out. So RX to me is one of those kind of tools where I really kind of go in hard at the start. As you saw there, I was going into a lot of detail there, and I do this for all the lead vocals, all the backing vocals. You know, I can literally spend like 8 hours just editing the vocal, you know, and then after that I'll then go into Melodyne, I'll then do more tuning, or I'll do kind of vocal timing. So there's so many elements of kind of the editing the vocal that I do before I apply the processing. So, you know, if you take a look at, you know, the ones I've already done up here, you can see that after I've done the RX, I've done even more editing. And that would have been some kind of timing issues going on in the track that I just felt like needed nudging. And to do that, I just used the Pro Tools nudge, and that way I can kind of feel it. So here, you know, again, going through the ends, there were some issues. As you can see, the cuts. So I've just kind of cleared them up, and I've gone through the whole song doing that. And that would be the same for the backing vocals as well, although there isn't actually any backing vocals in this case. So I didn't do it for the backing vocals here. But then after the RX is done, if we then actually just take a look at the plugins that I've used on the lead vocal, first up, I've just gone with some Spectral Shaper by Ozone, and that's just to take some harshness out of the vocal. So around kind of 2 to 4K. You know, Olivia's got quite a high voice. This will always be different for kind of every singer. But having that kind of high voice can add a lot of harshness. And to be honest with you, I've used all sorts of mics, all sorts of price range, and I've always felt between 2 and 4K on any mic has this kind of harsh sounding, especially kind of on female vocals. So I always like to kind of tame that. So that's kind of my first kind of part of the process that I'm doing. So if I just mute all of the other plugins, even the reverbs as well, and just hear it dry, and you can really hear what this plugin is doing.
Ooh, oh, Last Christmas I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away. This year to save me from tears.
So nothing was really happening on there apart from when she said this year, it was reducing this kind of frequency here.
Next day you gave me from tears. This year.
So if we go to the this year part,
this year,
you can see that that comes down, and that frequency is taking this out. You can really hear that resonant frequency that was kind of really popping out in the mix. And so that is exactly what this plugin is doing. It's just reducing that so it's not as harsh to the ear. So again, I'm not using this plugin kind of hammering down the vocal as the whole vocal is singing. I'm just doing it on certain areas of the vocal because the threshold is down minus 24.8, but it's not picking up all of the vocals. It's just picking up the ones that are kind of becoming offensive. When it gets over that threshold, it's pushing it down. So then after that, I then go into some virtual mix rack, and here I'm just doing some overall compression. This vocal was tracked with some compression, but here I just kind of I'm taming the vocal performance. Olivia's putting emotion into it, and she's kind of going up and down with the voice. And I've done a lot of kind of editing pre this, as you saw with the S's in RX. And so now this is just kind of controlling the performance and the emotion of the vocal. So if we take a listen with this virtual mix rack on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special.
So you can hear it's not a huge difference, but it's just kind of taming down when she goes really kind of loud, and then it's kind of, just basically controlling it. So there's nothing that's going to peak out in the vocal performance. And as I said before, it allows me to do kind of less volume automation when that is the case. And then next to that, I've just got some brightness, and that's just to add a little bit of kind of top end to the vocal. So that's not doing much really at all. And then after that, we go into the first EQ, and this EQ is I'm just taking out frequencies that I just don't like. Offensive frequencies that I think are too piercing, things that are creating kind of boxiness, and that would have been, to do with the room as well. So I am taking out some kind of 500 hertz here, which is to do with the room, and kind of some low end as well. So if we just take a listen with this on and off, you'll hear what it's doing.
This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special.
So to me, it's just making it more pleasant. And, I do these EQ moves when the music is playing, but just for this demonstration, I am soloing the vocal. But if we actually just take a listen to the frequencies that I'm taking out, I'm just rolling off, some bottom end here, the rumble, the kind of the room noise that you're just not going to need. In this case, it was 66 hertz, but again, it changes from time to time. Then we got kind of some kind of boxiness going on here. And you'll notice, around this frequency, around 600 hertz, I used a dynamic function on that, and I didn't use it on the others. Now, the reason why was because when I was kind of playing this through and listening to it, there was just this kind of around 500-600 hertz kind of pushing through, but it was only on certain words. But then when I took it out, up to up to minus 2 dB without it being dynamic, it was making the vocal sound really thin and kind of it lost energy. So what I did was I made it dynamic, so it just happened on those certain parts. Then next to it got a little bit of kind of 1K area. They were just kind of offensive frequencies I just felt were a bit too kind of brittle and harsh. Then I got the 2.5K again. That's that kind of electronic signal that I just think just makes mics sound a bit cheap. But you can see kind of these frequencies around here is actually similar to what I was doing kind of with the spectral shaper. But I just felt like after I'd added the compressor, because I'd done the spectral shaper before the compressor, so after I'd added it, I just felt like I needed to tame it a little bit more, because, you know, every compressor that you put on a vocal has a harmonic saturation and it kind of changes the way the vocal sounds. Now 1176s I love, they're a classic, they sound great. But I do find sometimes when I'm adding, especially if I'm doing kind of, you know, more than 5 dB of compression on an 1176, you do kind of get a build up around that 2 to 5K again. And so I just felt like I needed to control that even more, and that's why I took it out in that section. And then to finish off the vocal chain, I've then just got a de-esser. Now, again, this de-esser is doing very light de-essing, because as you saw, you know, when I was cleaning the vocals up in RX and I was doing the manual de-essing on the certain S's and the T's, you know, the ones that were spiking out, I've already taken them down 12 dB in RX, so I'm not having to do much in this plugin. So if we actually have a look at, you know, how much gain reduction is actually happening, it shouldn't be too much at all.
This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears.
So you can see there, it's actually hardly doing anything. What it's doing is it's catching some of the ones where I either missed it in RX, or it's just catching the ones where it could have gone down a bit more in RX. So again, it's just purely just taming and just getting that vocal to sit just nicely where it needs to be. And then after that, I've got some more virtual mix rack, and this is kind of where I do kind of my additive EQ on the lead vocal bus. So this is where I'm shaping, I've taken out the parts of the vocal that I don't like, and now I'm kind of tonal shaping the vocal. So I'm adding a bit of brightness, maybe taking out some boxiness as well, depending if I felt like I needed to take more out, I'll do it on here as well. So if we have a listen with this virtual mix rack off and on, you'll hear what it's doing.
This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special.
So here I can see I'm just taking out a bit more 4K. Again, I felt like that 4K was really offending in this vocal for some reason. Again, every vocal is different, so you're gonna, there's gonna be different songs in different keys, which is gonna change kind of what you're doing EQ wise, of course. But for some reason, I was really having a hard time with that harshness. So I took a little bit more out there. I took a little bit of 400 out, just some boxiness. I did a tiny high pass filter, well, up to 85 hertz. And that's just because, where I've added more compression, and I'm getting more of a build up of low end, and so I just wanted to control it again at the end as well. And then I decided to chuck a Neve kind of style EQ. I just like the Neve color, so I thought, why not put it on? And here I'm just taking out some 3.2K again, so again that mark between 2 and 5K is coming out a lot. 1.6K, there was some kind of nasal stuff that I didn't really like, and around 220 hertz I wanted to put some body back in the vocal, because when I'm taking lots of kind of high-end frequencies away, and you know, the mid-range as well, like the boxiness. I don't want the vocal to sound weak. I want the vocal to still sound kind of punchy, strong, and in your face. So what I've done is I've taken out all the offending frequencies, and then I'm bringing in a little bit of kind of, you know, oomph and a bit of warmth back into the vocal, and that's what I'm doing on this Neve, and also around 220 hertz. And then after that, the channel strip, I'm purely just using this Pultec style EQ just for its nice high end around 8K. Now the Pultecs are known to have a smooth top end, and so I'm just kind of emphasizing the top end a little bit more just to give me that kind of pop gloss feel. You know, if I just have a play around with the dials in this plugin, you'll hear kind of what it is I'm actually doing.
This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart.
You can really see that Pultec style EQ is really bringing out that high end, and it's bringing out a really nice high end as well, because sometimes when you add high end, it can add so much kind of brightness and brittle and just sound horrible to the ear, and it makes it, you know, you're unable to listen to a vocal for a long time, where the Pultecs have really nailed kind of getting that kind of high end right. And then after that, there was some additional EQ issues that I just felt like that was needed. I probably did this at the end of the mix when I was feeling, you know, what else can I do to improve the mix? You know, any offending frequencies that were causing more problems. And, you know, again, I'm just kind of controlling kind of the mid-range and really controlling this high end as well, because, you know, everything's always kind of give and take. You add something, you may have to pull something away. And so with the VMR, you know, I was adding some brightness, adding some frequencies. Sometimes it can look a bit counterintuitive of why have I increased a frequency on one plugin and then I'm taking it down on another. But no, these plugins here, these are, you know, they've got harmonic saturation, you know, they sound different. So if I boost, let's say 8K on a Pultec, but then, you know, want to control that kind of 8K with an EQ after, it's going to sound different than if I hadn't boosted it in to begin with and just didn't do the EQ. So you're kind of creating a different vocal sound by doing that, even though it can look like, you know, oh, Ed's, you know, EQ'd it and then he's gone back on himself with another EQ. Sometimes that is the case, but it will give you a different sound doing that than it would do if you just didn't do it at all. And so that's why I kind of experiment and do that sort of thing. Or, you know, you may see, you know, that kind of stuff happen. But let's just have a listen with these frequencies, kind of what it is I'm taking out.
This give it to someone. I gave you. You gave it from tears. I'll give it a and twice.
Again, just subtle things, just things that were just poking out a little bit too much. And then to finish off the vocal chain, I'm just going into some compression just to kind of just smooth everything over of all the processing that I've done. And in this instance, I've done the Mixland Audio Unfairchild with, you know, Jesse Ray's plugin. It's a fantastic Fairchild kind of emulation plugin. I absolutely love it. And it just kind of gives me this kind of warm tone and kind of pushes the vocal forward. I've still got it on trial. As you can see, I've got 11 days left. So, you know, maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. We'll see. But at the moment, it's sounding really good. So it looks like it's going to be a keeper. But let's just have a listen with this plugin on and off and you'll hear what it's doing. I will warn you now, it is very subtle, but it's the subtle things that go a long way.
This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to to save me from tears. I'll give it to someone special.
Did warn you, it is very subtle, but it's just gluing all of that processing together, and it just makes me happy, and that's the main thing. So I went with that. It sounded good. It has, you know, characteristics of what I like, so that's why I've gone with it. And then I used a Bricasti reverb on this. Well, it's the Seventh Heaven, and the Seventh Heaven reverb that I've used that's a lie. I didn't use a Bricasti reverb. I was going to use the Seventh Heaven reverb, but I ended up going for the standard Valhalla Vintage Verb Concert Hall, and that was just a reverb on this vocal. So if we take a listen with this reverb on and off, you'll hear kind of how much this is actually adding to the vocal.
This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day, you gave it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special.
And that's it. That's, you know, that creates this kind of atmosphere around the vocal, and to me it makes it magical. You know, it's December, it makes it Christmassy, you know, and you know, with that kind of reverb, you know, the Valhalla Vintage Verb is a classic. It sounds great, and you know, I would have just played around with the pre-delay just to kind of get the vocal to kind of sit in its place. Now, pre-delay is, you know, how long is the reverb delayed for before, you know, the vocal. So what I mean by that is you know, if you have a very short pre-delay and you have a 4-second decay, your vocal is going to sound very kind of wet and muddy, and the reverb is going to hit straight away. But by having a longer pre-delay, it means I'm having more of that dry vocal up front before the vocal before the vocal reverb comes in. So it just makes it a little bit kind of clearer and cleaner, and it just enables me to have a bigger decay without it sounding muddy. So it's really important to play around with pre-delays and decays. I think a lot of people, they may not necessarily play around with the pre-delay, and I know some people kind of time it to the BPM, but I just go off feel. You know, I literally just whack the reverb up and I just play around up and down on the pre-delay until it just sits right to me and it doesn't sound messy. And by having a longer pre-delay as well, you can actually have a really big reverbing sounding vocal without it getting in the way of, you know, the actual vocal itself. So that's definitely food for thought and things to play around with. But yeah, that's kind of the mix of this song. It's very simple. It's just a piano and a vocal. There's not too much going in there. I mean, if we actually have a look at the piano, I've done previous videos on piano, so I won't go into too much detail, but you know, standard EQ, bit of compression, bit of reverb, a little bit of delay, and that's just to kind of get it to bounce a little bit, you know, in the ears. And then I've just got some Pro MB. Maybe I'll make another video on that. But yeah, that's kind of the vocal side of this. But the main point is the RX. And, you know, the RX is super important. It's, you know, I use it a lot in my workflow. And I always say to people that, you know, that I'm mixing, if you can get everything perfect at source, so even if it's not recorded perfect, but like you RX it. So, you know, obviously, you know, it'd be the best thing to have is everything just done perfectly, so you don't have to do any editing. But especially vocals, if you really take the time and you edit the vocals to a T, like you don't want to over edit, but edit so it's like clean. You'll know yourself, you know, if it's right or not. And then you just apply some plugins on, a bit of reverb, maybe a bit of delay if you want it, and then just kind of let it just sit. You'll be surprised how much, you know, your mixing game will kind of go up. You know, a lot of people that come, they say, oh, you know, they're struggling to find a mix, or you know, they're not getting what they want. And actually, a lot of the time, if you give it to me and I just stick it in RX, clean it, leave the same plugins that they had on already, you know, 9 times out of 10 they're a little bit more kind of where they want to be without actually adjusting any of their techniques. So try using RX. Give it a go. Really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and also leave a comment. I'll get back to all the comments under this video. If you've got any questions regarding RX, or any, you know, questions on how I'm doing things, or different ways of doing things and different methods, then, you know, let me know in the comments below and I'll get back to every single one of you. Thanks again, and I'll see you all again next week for another video.